Hey everyone. Hey everyone. Hey everyone. Hey everyone. Hey everyone.
Hey everyone! While many anticipated, including myself, that Josh Seiter, former contestant of The Bachelor, was all trolling us, no one knew when this gender bubble would burst. This infamous Josh Seiter character appeared on Prime Time with Alex Stein yesterday to reveal how he has conned the left over the past several months. During the beginning of the interview, he maintained his womanhood, sporting a trans pride color themed necktie and lipstick.
You know, becoming friends with you, it's made me realize that some trans people are actually pretty cool and laid back.
Well, I appreciate that, Alex, and I always try to be the best representation of trans people that I can be.
If for anyone who is not obsessed with gender and spending all their days online talking about gender, which I'm not either, let me give you the recap. Josh Seiter is an American male who on the 20th of May came out via an Instagram open letter. He stated that he struggled with his gender identity for the last 3 decades and that he has suppressed his inner woman due to a religious and conservative upbringing. He claimed to no longer be coping with the mental turmoil and asked for his followers' support as he begins his transition to a woman. Right? Came as a bit of a shock to everyone who obviously knows him and follows him, as previously he had always appeared to be a masculine presenting male. This followed by months of videos documenting his transition, despite changing very little about his appearance.
Hey guys, just wanted to let you know I'm completely unbothered by all of the hate that I've been getting in my DMs and the comments. Already know I look better than 99% of the people hating on me. So anyways, just wanted to let you know.
Speaking to the dailymail.com ahead of the interview, Seiter confirmed that his transgender stunt was nothing more than a quote-unquote social experiment he'd cooked up to cause controversy. What a shock. Well, I'm not shocked, but what is interesting is wondering how pivotal is this moment going to be in the gender ideological debate we are having in the West. As you'll learn in this video, Josh Seiter has released a can of worms, dropped a bomb on this debate, which perhaps even people on the far left, on the fringes of this gender wars debate, may not be able to ignore. Hey everyone! It is Jack. Welcome back to my channel. I'm very glad to have you here with me, or if you are new, hello. Very excited for this video, but before I start, if you like my content, please be sure to subscribe. I know a lot of people watch my videos regularly who are not in fact subscribed, and that would really help me get to 10K, can't believe it, 10K by Christmas. So hit that subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to support the channel. You can also support me through either one-time donation via PayPal, joining my YouTube community to get early access to videos, or even better, join the Jack Jewell Uncut Substack, where you will get the full, uncut, unashamed, untamed takes, too controversial for YouTube, as well as bonus footage seen nowhere else. And with that said, let's get back to the trans troll, Josh. In this interview with Alex Stein yesterday, Josh removed his makeup live on air to signify his detransition moment of reveal. He then announced it had all been a hoax.
Well, I gotta be honest. For the last 5 months, I've been conducting a social experiment online to expose how gullible and how delusional the left is.
Alex Stein commended him, saying this is one of the greatest social experiments of modern age. While I think this might be a bit of an exaggeration, I do think this moment could end up being super significant in this whole conversation where we have constantly been debating this notion of postmodernist gender identity theory, where one simply has to put up their hand and say, I identify as a man or a woman or neither or tree in order to be viewed as that thing, rather than your gender being reflected of biological reality, which is the side, of course, you know I'm on. What I like about what Josh has done is that he really just calls it as it is, no bullshit. He describes trans women as putting on quote unquote woman face.
Any biological man putting on woman face and putting on makeup is pulling a stunt.
He admits himself to impersonating one of these people, faking being a faker, of men putting on dresses and then believing themselves to be women, needing the outside world to validate that belief.
And I hope that this could help some people understand that just because you put on dresses and makeup as a man doesn't magically make you a woman.
I largely agree with this position, although we do see a range of levels in terms of claims from trans people. Some actually think they're real women, some acknowledge they're not, but are more comfortable that way, which we'll get into. But as Josh explains, the ideology itself means we have to affirm everyone who states their gender identity.
When you take it to its logical end, it leads to absurd and illogical results.
Before Josh started his journey into womanhood, he investigated the requirements to be trans.
It says that trans people don't have to transition, don't have to have gender dysphoria, don't have to get surgery, and don't have to get hormones.
And you may think this sounds insane, but that is really where we are. And charities and institutions like Stonewall actually peddle this ideology and have for a long time. Taken from an FAQ on Trans and Stonewall's website, they state you do not have to have taken any medical steps in your transition. You can use the bathroom that fits your gender, expect your employers to recognize your gender, and access gender-specific services. Yikes. It still flabbergasts me that when people sat down to write these rules, it was not very obvious what was glaring them in the face, that if they took it that far, eventually this would all come back to bite them. And while this is sort of a policy and a train of thought which is supposed to protect a very small percentage of a very vulnerable, marginalized group in society, it presents a massive safeguarding risk for women and children, which we have now seen been exploited time and time again. And Josh Seiter makes this obvious in his story. Josh Seiter used the platform he created on Instagram to troll us with many of the tropes that we are actually seeing all the time from the trans community online and in real life. He mimics real men who are actually being serious in these scenarios, and one thing I commend him on as well, he manages to expose many areas of how this ideology actually affects society. One example is female-only spaces, otherwise known as the bathroom debate.
I just had one of the worst experiences of my life. And when I went to use the restroom, there was a woman and her daughter, and the woman cursed at me before she stormed out of the restroom.
Well, this is just lovely. I had a neighbor confront me for using the women's restroom. I lived here for 4.5 years. Everyone should know that I'm a trans woman. I should be able to use the restroom. The apartment manager knows I'm trans. Everyone knows my name is Kaylee. And then my group of friends, I thought my friends were all starting to yell at me saying I escalated and because she had 2 kids. I didn't even see the kids. They were there and I just lost it. None of them stood up for them. They blamed me that I was the one that was at fault.
Which we have seen cause many issues for women, including a most recent case this year in Planet Fitness, where a woman was banned from the gym for outing a trans woman who was basically just a male who hadn't presented himself in any other way except in one photo wearing a skirt, actually shaving in the bathroom.
I just got back from the gym, and I just want to say one thing I am truly grateful for is Planet Fitness. They have been awesome during my transition. Ever since I talked to management and let them know I was transitioning, they let me use the locker room that I identify with.
And the fact that Planet Fitness prioritized the needs of this man, this minority figure, over this elderly woman shows how we have got to a truly insane place. Josh takes a moment to mention the problem in prisons.
Why don't you question the men getting transferred to women's prisons and committing violent rapes and impregnating women prisoners?
Where we have seen many cases of, again, trans quote-unquote women actually using this identity by means of gaining access to a female-only space where women are highly vulnerable, and in several of these cases committing atrocious crimes. This time, it's at the hands of state government who are so radicalized in the ideology that they can't see past the serious safeguarding risks which seem to be apparent to the majority of the population. Josh explains how everyone is valid, no matter what stage of their journey they're at, what their identity is, or what they look like.
I can present exactly how I am, and I can be trans and valid if I say that's my gender identity.
So tri-gender, there's man on one side, woman on the other, and non-binary is somewhere in the middle, and then I take up that whole area, the whole bar.
And what a lot of people noticed with Josh is that his platform was very reminiscent of none other than Dylan Mulvaney, the trans-identified man who several years ago came out with his Days of Girlhood series.
Day 1 of being a girl, and I have already cried 3 times.
Which saw him transitioning from what was once a gay man into now a straight, glamorous woman.
Day 17 of being a girl.
Day 6 of being a girl.
Day 74 of being a girl.
Day 10 of being a girl.
It's day 335 of being a girl. It's day 600 of being a woman.
And what's crazy is so many people took Dylan seriously, including women.
It's day 100.
It's day 100! It's day 100. It's day 100.
It's day 100.
It's day 100!
It's day 100 of being a girl.
And because this was taken so seriously, within a year we saw him at the White House with the now understood senile president of the USA advocating for the medical transition, otherwise known as the sterilization and mutilation of minors.
Do you think states should have a right to ban gender-affirming healthcare?
I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that.
And again, this was all taken seriously. Josh mocks creators which have devolved the idea of trans down to such a ridiculous level that it doesn't matter if you have a full beard.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to jump on here and talk for a second about my facial and body hair. I'm gonna keep it. I like my facial and body hair. Not everyone has dysphoria over the same things.
I'm the bearded lady.
A lot of you use facial hair as the defining quality to determine whether someone is or isn't a woman, which has always baffled me. If you're aligned with womanhood, then why do you have a beard? Because, Karen, it looks like this. You cannot sit here and tell me that you're not like, wow, that just frames your face really well. And I don't owe you any other explanation than that. That's all.
If you have a full cock bulge,
I feel like all women have a right to feel beautiful and seen when they're trying on clothes. I feel like for those of us that were blessed in certain departments, it's especially important that we have clothes that fit our large appendages.
Normalize the bulge. We are normalizing the bulge.
you can still be valid in your womanhood. Again, several of his videos are very like that of Dylan Mulvaney, and what is very funny is that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two on which is taking their trans identity more seriously than the other. And this is more than ever evident in Josh's videos where he performs stereotypical female acts, which is mocking and misogynistic and insulting to women in order to show that he's now living out his girlhood.
So I am cooking up a storm today. I have pasta in here, I have cookies in the oven, I just made some muffins. But in public, I feel like customer service is so much better now that I'm a woman.
Heels? They're my hiking heels. I love them. Okay, come on. Oh. Did you see that? I gotta get out of here.
You want to come kayaking?
Society affirming Dylan's insane notions of his girlhood led to a crazy conclusion. What do you know? Dylan released a single and music video, Days of Girlhood, this year, in which he illustrates his experience as a woman by means of activities such as picking up medication, not being able to get out of bed, doing a walk of shame, and listening to the Twilight soundtrack. Even this was defended by lots of people on the woke left. And this is because when you buy into the ideology that you just need to say you're trans to be trans, you don't need to look a certain way, you don't need to be on a medical pathway or any stage of that medical pathway, this means that they cannot challenge any of these situations without their entire ideology falling apart. So really, they are the fools. And I noticed this in particular with one of my favorite public figures, gay comedian James Barr, who is often on Piers Morgan defending every single position of this community.
He's made a killing on mocking women with his stereotypical misogynistic comments.
Well, see, I'm all... You wouldn't have stopped Riley from misgendering.
Well, hang on, I'm going to come to that.
That's clearly not true.
I didn't misgender her.
No, but you would have stopped her from doing that on your programme.
Well, okay, we'll come to you in a moment.
And who are you to talk about who a woman is?
This is wrong, and this isn't the first time that Dylan Mulvaney has been under fire. His first days of girlhood, he came out after day 365 or whatever day.
As a gay man, I'm also a victim of the patriarchy. We all bloody are. But that's not a trans woman's fault. That is men's fault. Men are the problem, not Dylan, not trans women.
Except trans women are men.
I suspect that James probably has lots of doubts about these ideas, but the thing is, he's someone who's actually built a career, massive platform and social network off these ideas. So to even contemplate the idea that perhaps he might be wrong on some of these issues, he would risk losing everything. So he will gladly be misogynistic in order to maintain his status.
And so they're going to say whatever is going to get them in favor with the people in power. And the media and the left have made it clear that if you go along with the trans movement, they'll love you and you'll be part of their community.
Just great from the hashtag #BeKind community. The team at Pink News are another one of my favorites in this debate. Pink News reports on all the positive trans stuff. So there were God knows how many articles about Dylan Mulvaney praising her girlhood, right? What's interesting is that they have never reported on Josh Seiter's transition because it is quite obvious to a lot of people that he is trolling. But if you compare their content, there's not much difference between them. And this is not specific to this story because Pink News will platform any positive case, any case of a trans person being discriminated against, but will never report on all of the trans-identified males being violent towards women and abusing their position of power due to this whole concept. And on Dylan, I really don't believe that he has struggled mentally with his gender his whole life. What I believe is one day Dylan sat down and decided, oh my God, I'm going to make this silly Day of Girlhood video. It went mega viral. And then he thought, I'll make another one and I'll make another one. And before you know it, he's having facial feminization surgery. He is famous. He's earning God knows how much. Even his Days of Girlhood music video, he knew that that was going to offend people. He knew it. He doesn't care because he is a self-centered narcissist who will do anything to maintain a status of fame. And it is largely rumored that Dylan has not taken any hormones because it still looks like he has an extremely low body fat percentage. It's not like he started it that old. So Dylan, in a way, hasn't done the drastic stuff like top surgery, estrogen, or bottom surgery, but he still enjoyed all the benefits of this new marginalized status, even though he has been obscenely offensive towards women.
Man up, he had to man up. So he crawled up on that cross and he stuck it out. Cue testosterone. And now it's up to me and it's time to man up.
What's also similar to Josh is he has tried many methods of actually gaining fame before, such as reality TV stunts and being a they, them prior to being a woman.
It's a they outfit of the day.
He probably figured out this was becoming a little bit too mainstream. Something Pink News did report on was when Josh Seiter actually had a hoax death. Some people think that he did this himself, again to gain publicity, but who knows. So Dylan's story poses a wider question around this trans typology. We're used to having the highly effeminate homosexual male who often went through bullying, abuse, sometimes sexual assault, who has coped in their role as a gay man by means of becoming a woman. And also the autogynephilic male, which I'm going to get into. What we haven't usually seen in the past is the homosexual type transitioning later in life or slightly older in life. We usually see them, late teens, early 20s. But what I've noticed is that there are a growing number of what were once gay men, adults transitioning well into their 30s. And I am skeptical of the gender dysphoria notion here. Now, I may be wrong. Some of them may have struggled constantly and not been able to find another solution for themselves. Whether this is the right one or not, I'm not sure. But now we can see there are obvious benefits to transitioning, especially when you are a charismatic person who wants to have a social media account. I see a lot of these accounts skyrocket in followers, so the temptation around it is obvious. Which means, are we seeing more to the transition of males beyond the original typology philosophy? Josh exposes the hypocrisy in these ideas when they play a clip of Megyn Kelly, who likens his woman face to actually that of blackface, which many on the left would find really offensive.
Well, she makes some really good points that there's absolutely no difference between trans people doing woman face and people doing blackface at minstrel shows. They're both highly offensive and people should be offended by it.
He claims that the liberal left, what I call the woke left or the hyper-liberal left, will do anything to stay part of their tribe. And I do agree largely. I think a lot of these liberals haven't thought too deeply about this, or like a lot of them do, they actively avoid the counter arguments in order to stay in their echo chamber. Some of them know what's going on, but they just don't care. And while this is all about the left in this case, I don't think it is specific to them, although I do think we see it more on the left, this tribalistic nature right now, than the right, because the left largely has ownership over all the institutions, academia, the government. So we've seen far more people lose their jobs because they've strayed from the textbook of the liberal left instead of on the right, where people seem to be able to disagree easier. But this phenomenon is not at all specific to the left. We see it in, for example, the gender critical movement, people getting cancelled for using she, her pronouns. And I think another reason people can maintain this cognitive dissonance and mental gymnastics is because Stonewall, GLAAD, and all these charities, they peddled the trans ideology and masked it as a civil rights movement, likening it to the same thing as being gay. While we have now pretty much scientifically understood that once someone is homosexual, whether it is innate or it happens in the early years, they're not able to change that. So there is this pervasive guilt carrying on from the way gay people have been treated for centuries and throughout the AIDS epidemic. People don't want to repeat that. People feel bad, and therefore a lot of them just blindly accepted this idea that, oh right, you can be born in the wrong body, and that's kind of the same thing, so we better be kind, we better affirm. And what Stonewall never wanted you to actually sit down and think about is one of these things, gay, involves accepting someone from who they are, and the other one, trans, involves lying to someone for the sake of what they want. And I just love how Josh does not tiptoe around any of the controversial things in this debate. He seems to give zero fucks, and it makes me wonder what is his financial security like, because he's clearly not afraid of being cancelled.
But instead, the left celebrates trans women and tries to denigrate anyone who dresses up as Michael Jackson for Halloween.
The cultural appropriation thing is something I've called out a lot. And we see this too in the non-binary, typically straight girl phenomenon, where identifying as this, even if you have a husband, you have a boyfriend that you've had for years, even if you're not bisexual, you then get to enjoy all of the marginalized stuff a gay person experiences. Also with asexuality, for example, this Yasmin Benoit figure is the representative of Queer Britain, a museum in London. Like, what is going on? But the left never seems to find this offensive. However, if I wear some braids or a sombrero for Halloween, you better be sure they're going to be on my back. Something I'm also really glad Josh mentioned was autogynephilia.
Well, you just mentioned autogynephilia, so I'll address that first and then I'll address the second part of your question. Autogynephilia is when men are turned on at the thought of themselves being women. And I think a lot of trans women are turned on at the thought of themselves being women. Guess what? It doesn't magically make them women. It doesn't mean we have to accept that they're women. They are simply men turned on at the thought of themselves being women. That's great. We live in a free country. You can do whatever you want, but don't make your fetish my truth.
A lot of people stray away from this idea, even when they're very critical of trans in the public eye. I don't think I've ever actually heard J.K. Rowling use the term autogynephilia, for example. I'm not sure why this is the case, but this scientific term coined by Ray Blanchard in the 1980s is actually becoming more and more widely known. And I think this is a very good thing because particularly with AGP, a lot of women and men actually take a step back and really consider whether this ideology is something they want to believe in. In fact, it's not like we're seeing trans people every day, but what we think of in our minds when someone mentions the transsexual woman is a lot of the trans women that we've seen in the mainstream media. However, the mainstream media has historically always platformed the trans women attracted to men, i.e. hyper-feminine gay men, who typically pass far better as women and also don't seem threatening because they're not attracted to women. When in actual fact, the literature shows that anywhere between 80 and 90% of males identifying as women are of the autogynephilic subtype, and these men typically are not naturally feminine at all. What motivates them is the desire to become feminine, to feminize themselves. And while I think autogynephilia is more complex than it is portrayed on the gender critical side as merely a perverted fetish, we get some autogynephilic men who are respectful, who acknowledge that it's what they have and don't infringe on women's rights. It is these trans women who are causing all the problems and actually convincing young, vulnerable children into their ideology when what's motivating them is their sexuality.
You know, it sounds crazy, but trans women can produce milk to feed a baby. Here's how. Step 1, you must grow your coconuts. After about 3 to 5 years of estrogen, you will have fully functional milk ducts from which you can feed a baby.
It sure does pay off when I'm in the women's locker room, taking my shower and open up the shower door and it's just tits and ass just hanging around, nothing on, Yes. Well, like I said, I'm not scared to go into the women's locker room. I've been in them twice.
So how long have you felt you were female?
Before I started transitioning, I was at the point where I could not pretend to be something I was not.
And something I critique Josh on here is it would have been interesting to hear him also explain the homosexual pathway in some of the ways I mentioned before and how you can end up identifying that way due to trauma and other things you've been through, including internalized homophobia. Josh manages to cover several other problematic areas, such as the trans sports debate.
I entered my first powerlifting competition. So it's the women's open division,
in which we've seen many males claim the identity and then beat women's asses in sports, including figures like Leah Thomas beating Riley Gaines, Monte Kelly, a biological male assumed intersex, winning the boxing title at this year's Olympics, and also that Paralympian gal in his 50s who managed to squirm his way into the Paralympics with women far younger than him.
Trans women are not a threat to women's sports.
He mentions how this ideology is being pushed in our schools.
So homeschooling is not a bad alternative, especially now when you see the things people are being taught. There's actually tests now asking kids if a man can become a woman and just these very loaded questions about gender. And if they answer with the woke answer, they get extra points.
He mentions how this ideology is being pushed in our schools by insane teachers.
Hi, here's some things my students have said/done since I came out and changed my teacher name.
And yes, most of them are getting away with it.
You have a new name? Well, yes, it's a name that makes me a lot happier, and that's why I changed it. I like your new name. I do too, but it's nice to know I have your approval. Mix? You mean like mixing you up like cookie dough? If that's gonna help you remember it, yeah, cookie dough works. Excuse me, Miss K, it's Mix K! I did not ask them to do that.
He even makes a video supporting Palestine.
Hey everyone, I'm outside the DNC showing my support to Palestinians. I know if I was in their country, they would accept me with open arms, so I just want to do the same here.
Which, as we know, is depicting this Queers for Palestine movement, in which we've seen many LGBTQ plus individuals support unequivocally a prescribed terrorist organization and present an extremely biased historical view of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. People like Matt Bernstein, I'm looking at you, Hezbollah apologist, or the lovely Aslan T. Bird, the non-binary, autistic, disabled, trans person on testosterone, who went from supporting the cause.
Roses are red, violets are blue. If you're not fighting for Palestine, I want nothing to do with you.
To then actually converting to Islam, and then who knows what's going to happen in 6 months from now. Or is the glamorous and head wreck drag queen Crystal, who once appeared on RuPaul's Drag Race UK, being some sort of self-elected spokesperson for the Palestinians and Hamas.
If you were in Palestine, you'd be thrown off a roof. This is a really annoying talking point that I thought we'd addressed by now, but apparently lots of you still need a reminder.
And blatantly just ignoring any of the plight Israelis are suffering.
I was doing selfies after the show and someone came up in the queue and they said, I loved the show and I agree with everything that you've said about Gaza, but as an Israeli, I wish you'd also mentioned the hostages. I was honestly shook, but I can't stop thinking about this interaction and about this idea that we always need to mention the hostages for balance.
Once again, we indulge this in our society by inviting Crystal onto live-time mainstream news channels in full drag to debate Zionists on the topic. What the fuck? Seiter even talks about Book Angel on the show.
Posers.
That's a gay man.
They're not
A gay
trans.
woman.
But I've been holding off.
Oh, that's a
'cause
gay
I just
woman.
didn't
Yeah,
wanna
gosh,
be
it
that
gets so
person.
confusing.
But everyone's
did have a
questioning
baby.
whether or not this
Brandon,
person is
Google Buck
actually
had a baby.
trans. Now, to answer that question from an actual transsexual person,
an actual
I would say no.
transsexual,
In my
actual
opinion,
faker.
no, I do not believe this person is trans.
A real transgender is actually a misnomer, right? For people that claim to have a hold on the science, they're horrible at lexicology and etymology. And they use these semantical games to try to confuse people, and they're always changing the meaning of words and things like that. And so he doesn't even understand that it's his own community that has set these rules. And I'm just playing within the limits of those rules. So if he's upset, he should be upset at the nebulous framework of medical guidelines that have come out when it pertains to transgender individuals, and he should be mad at the medical community for making it possible for anybody to say they're trans.
And this is one criticism I have, because they could acknowledge the fact that Buck has said that he is actually a woman, he's not a man, he's done these things to his body because it makes him feel good about himself, makes him more comfortable, and he actually dissuades people from getting wrapped up in these ideas, especially children. However, one thing I can agree with is the assertion that we have this notion of a true transsexual, someone who's really trans versus someone who's not. Even a lot of the gender critical or based trans creators sort of come out with this claim, and I actually asked you guys on my channel, in my community section, do you believe in the concept of true trans? Now, 34% of you said yes, 46 said no, and 17 said you're not sure. So I would answer no in this case, in that I don't think anyone is born trans. I don't think you're born in the wrong body, that your brain doesn't match your body. I do think there are a number of different motivations and pathways that lead someone to wanting to transition. And I recognize that some people do it and actually seem to live a better life. Now, this poses a question on, could they have been living a better life otherwise if they had been given other types of care? We're not sure. And what we do also know from the WPATH files is there is no scientific basis or evidence that these hormones and surgeries actually improve the quality of life, mental health, prospects for people who transition. And again, that's not to say that it doesn't, but we don't have the reliable studies. I see some people say that it is actually not good for anyone to do it. I don't really know. I'm more libertarian on this topic in that adults can sort of do what they like in this case. It's more of a cosmetic change. And something I did say when talking to Buck is, yes, it's a mental disorder. Yes, you need therapy, and transition is never ideal. That's not the ideal outcome to be a medical patient for life. But what if someone can't move past their dysphoria no matter how much therapy and medication they receive? Is sometimes in these exceptional circumstances, is that a good decision for them to make? Particularly if they are told that this does not mean society will accept you as this sex, it does not mean you get access to the spaces, sports, etc. Who knows? Not my decision to make. But if you transition and you're happy, then I believe you. Something else I asked is if a male 100% passes as a female, and I mean fully 100%. Now, some of you GCs thinks that's not possible, but let's assume it is. If they are only faced with two options, male and female, and no third option, they are dying for a pee, which bathroom do they go into? Now, interestingly, on YouTube, 62% of you said the female bathroom, while on X, only 25% said female, with the 75% saying male. And this poses a question of, does looking a certain way allow you certain privileges?
Trans people, we need to be realistic. If you know you look like a full-grown man, then you know damn well you should not be in women's spaces. And there are steps that trans people have to take in their transitions to earn certain privileges. Even I didn't step foot in women's spaces until I knew I was ready. If you know you're not ready and don't want to cause a scene, just wait. Give it time. Taking hormones for 2 days and identifying as a woman is not enough.
I also disagree with this, that some trans women sort of sit on a high horse and say, I took the steps, I waited until I was ready before I went into women's spaces. I don't think that any male has that right, but I do think that if we're going to provide these medical treatments, we will inevitably end up with some males who pass as females. Particularly now we've transitioned minors. And in cases where there are only two bathrooms, it sort of makes sense for someone to disrupt as little people as possible. In this case, the male would use the female bathroom. It's still something I'm not too sure about, but also I think that in a society where we offer these treatments, at the very least, a government level, all state public buildings need to have third options. And private businesses should also be encouraged to have these. Finally, it should also be the status quo and law that if you are a male and have done these things to your body, you use that third space. It does not give you access to the female space. But what do we do in the meantime if there are only two options? In one moment, Josh gets a little bit more serious, discussing the implications for affirming these people.
And so they deserve our compassion and our help. And that's why I did this, because I'm offended at the medical community and the media that indulges these delusions, eggs it on, and confirms these people's beliefs that they're something they're not, instead of treating them. Instead of giving them hormones, they need help.
And again, I agree here. If we blindly affirm, this is why we've seen this tsunami of detransitioners, these people who thought they needed something when in actual fact, they needed psychological support, therapy, and more of a mental health approach. And when we also blindly affirm at an institutional level, we see tyrannical trans women like India Willoughby becoming more and more unwell and narcissistic as they realize that not everyone is going to believe in this delusion. They were sold a lie. And finally, has Josh offended people?
And if their feelings are hurt that men don't magically become women because they slap on lipstick and say they are, I don't know what to tell them. They might want to read a biology book.
He doesn't seem to give two fucks about this, and I agree with him. I think we've got to a point in the West where this culture war is reaching a peak. At least I hope it's reaching a peak. Who knows, where a lot of the ideas being given to us by the hyper-liberal left do not reflect reality, or at most reflect a subjective train of thought when we talk about things like cultural appropriation. We're being told that we have to accept these things as fact, or people will be offended, and we need to not offend people. When in actual fact, if people cannot be offended when presented with reality, that is a you problem, not a me problem. It seems trivial, but when we acknowledge things not to be true in law and in society, this leaves a very vulnerable space to essentially convince a whole public anything. It is what happened in the Soviet Union, and we don't want that to happen again. And as more and more of us feel emboldened to believe in the truth so that we can avoid women being raped in prison by men, or their sporting opportunities being taken from them, or gay children being sterilized, my prediction is that we will see less and less people actually wanting to transition. Who knows? Do you think this whole medical approach will one day be distant history? I have no idea. I hope you enjoyed this video essay, everyone. Please let me know your thoughts on Josh Seiter. Are you a fan? Do you think what he's done is good? Do you think it's going to spur debate? Do you think that it's going to act as a bomb on this gender wars? Perhaps regardless of the fact that it was a hoax, you still feel offended by his use of woman face on the platform. Personally, I think this has been an interesting addition to the debate. I wonder what Dylan Mulvaney thinks.
Oh, I forgot that my crotch doesn't look like other women's crotches sometimes.
And with that said, everyone, I will see you soon for another video.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.